pipelines feeding in from the North Sea. Because we're wholly sufficient in gas, we've not had any need for it. In France and Germany, for instance, they have gas backup which will last 6 weeks, 2 months. The UK, if in fact the gas was removed, the network could stand up for no more than a matter of hours.
At the end of 2003, both Scottish Power and Scottish and Southern announced exciting plans to develop more storage capacity within the UK.
Huge storage facilities for gas will need to be built, and built soon, if Britain is to have a secure supply of electricity in future.
What about the French? They've got all that nuclear.
Well, we've been bringing electricity in from France for the past month. I mean, we can ask them, but I don't think the cables under the channel will carry much more.
I never thought I'd hear myself say, come back nuclear power, all is forgiven.
So, whatever happened to nuclear power?
Atomic scientists, by a series of brilliant discoveries, have brought us to the threshold of a new age.
Once, British governments saw nuclear power as the answer to all our energy needs. Like the French, we invested heavily. But nuclear power is expensive, and in the tough new electricity market, it has struggled to survive.
Nuclear power stations have a particular added problem, and that is that you can't turn nuclear power stations on and off rapidly. As a result, you can't take advantage of the most valuable electricity, which is when the electricity demand is peaking. So nuclear power stations provide the most important continuity at the bottom of the market, but it's cheap electricity. Consequence of that is that nuclear power stations suffer even more than other power stations in this market.
What's more, safety fears have made nuclear power stations unpopular with the public. 3/4 of them are due to close by 2014, and no new ones are planned.
Government has actually said that it needs a new white paper before any new nuclear power stations are built, even if it's a private company building them. And because it would take so long to actually build a nuclear power station, it wouldn't address any problems we've got in the next 15 years anyway.
Pressure is now falling in Britain's gas network, just as rush hour is beginning. Domestic use of gas and electricity is about to hit its peak, as millions of Londoners head home in the cold.
Hello. Hi, it's May. Hi, sweetheart. Yeah, you told me to tell you that you've got to get some milk. All right, then. I'll be home soon. See you then. Bye.
In winter, it is homes which consume the most gas. But despite the pipeline crisis, they will not be cut off.
There are 20 million gas customers in the UK in households, and to go around turning these off and then turning them back on again is not a safe practice. Instead, the industry will always prefer to interrupt the industrial customers. However, not all industry can be interrupted this quickly and in this way. But critically, our large power station fleet, which will be using a lot of gas at this time, could be interrupted.
It is a bitter irony. Some of the first users in line to be shut off are the very gas-fired power stations which are struggling to keep the lights on in December 2010.
We're going to lose gas for 5 stations around the southeast. I'm going to have to shut them down completely. We're 2,300 megawatts short. I need some help in this control room. Thank you.
Well, we now have a double whammy where we have a major gas problem, and that major gas problem has caused a major electricity problem. Although these are two very different networks with very different dynamics and engineering constraints upon them, nonetheless, trying to solve the problem in one may exacerbate the problem in another. So this is a very, very difficult problem to solve, and we just have never attempted to solve a problem of this magnitude in this country ever before.
Yeah, go ahead for control room.
Put in at your leisure, over.
Message received. HP feed pump going in now. Control room.
12 hours after the explosion in Russia, all the gas-fired power stations in East Anglia, close to where the pipeline enters Britain, go offline.
OK, message received. Thank you. Jerry, we're losing gas. I need to trip the unit. OK.
We're getting reports of major power cuts across East Anglia. To your radio, and we'll stay shivering and in the dark. This one's for you.
The National Grid has cut off most of East Anglia, but that won't solve the problem. Electricity flows automatically to where demand is greatest, to London. Power cuts there are now inevitable, and the battle is on to save the entire network from collapse.
In a situation where you have a shortage of generation and the control engineers are already doing their best to match the generation with the demand and control the system frequency, then it can put a lot of stress on the control room, a lot of stress on the control engineers to make rapid decisions and make the right decisions. If for some reason they are delayed in making a decision or they make the wrong decision, that could result in the whole system being shut down.
And all the while, as more and more people head home, domestic gas consumption is rising, burning up the gas the power stations need to keep generating electricity.
Well, during a power loss in high-rise buildings, lifts, of course, will come to a standstill. Trapped in a lift in a tower block, you won't know that there's been a power cut across the region. You will know nothing at all.
There is some spare capacity in the north of England, where coal and nuclear power stations and wind farms are still running. The electricity travels hundreds of miles through the transmission lines. Keeping the voltage and frequency stable is testing the National Grid's engineers to the limit. But as they struggle to keep the system in balance, the weather has one more trick to play.
The strong winds will ease rapidly as that comes right across us, particularly for Scotland and northern England, where we've had that blast of northerly winds. It means we won't have the bitter wind chill by day, but overnight it's going to get very cold.
High pressure over the north is a common feature of British winter weather. It means that much of the country is now without wind. At a stroke, half our wind power is lost.
What we know is that the wind blows sufficient for these windmills to be producing about 35%, perhaps 40% of the time. So the paradox of building windmills is that you have to build a lot of ordinary power stations to back them up, and those are going to be almost certainly gas in the short to medium term. And that's what's required. Now, if you ask the question, well, who's making sure there's enough gas stations out there to back up the windmills? The answer is nobody.
The loss of wind power on top of the loss of gas following the explosion means that tonight, the National Grid is at breaking point.
If you've got a fault on the transmission system, say due to weather, and the transmission system was already under stress, perhaps operating beyond its design standards, that could result in a collapse of the system in the southeast of England.
During the cold winter, the network has already had its share of frozen power lines and broken cables. On December the 15th, 2010, just one more will push it over the edge. It's called catastrophic collapse. southeast of England is out in the cold.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your driver. Do apologise for the delay to this service. I'm awaiting information from my line controller. Thank you.
The people who will be affected by this emergency will initially be those who are trapped, people trapped in lifts, those in the underground, those who may be on trains. But the most vulnerable people will be the elderly and the very young.
In a power cut, it is in tower blocks that people are most at risk. Mona is home alone on the 11th floor of her block.
Well, one of the first things people will do is pick up the telephone and try to find out what's going on. Without light and without heat, people immediately are going to start to get very irritable and quite worried and will be seeking more information.
Mom, come home. I'm scared.
Mona and her mother are just two of more than 20 million people across the southeast who are now without electricity. In London, the streets are filled with stranded commuters, and motorists are trapped in their cars as road lighting and traffic lights fail.
Well, of course, what you'll then get is many, many vehicles on the road with no traffic lights, no street lighting, and considerable gridlock. In the city, that will be chronic. Even in the outskirts, you'll still have lines of cars, all trying to go more or less in the same direction, trying to get into an area which has electricity.
That will be a disastrous situation for emergency services to try and deal with, and to try and move their vehicles through to do the things that they should be doing under the circumstances.
At the DTI, the emergency lights are going on, and the press office are trying to field inquiries about what's happened. TV and radio continue to broadcast, and as word spreads around Whitehall of the extent of the power cut, journalists make their way to Bill McAllister's door.
No, tell them they'll have to wait. Well, I don't know. Yeah, whatever. You just put out a holding statement for now. Yes. Tell them I'll be down in 10 minutes. We should have something concrete by then. I've got 6 TV crews downstairs screaming for information. What do I say to them?
Well, most of the southeast's been without power since 6 p.m. That's about 8 million homes, and all rail links south of Rugby.
Yes, they know that. When will the power be back on?
But it'll be hours before they even start to bring the grid back up, and we could be talking a couple of days before everyone's back on. I really wouldn't make any promises. Yes. He'll be down in 5 minutes. No questions, just a statement.
If the transmission has been shut down, then it can take up to 24 hours to get the whole of the transmission system re-energised. But the problem is, if the gas is unavailable, which has caused the shutdown in the first place, then you've only got a certain amount of electricity available to meet the demand. If there's not sufficient electricity available, then there will be a programme of rotating power cuts to meet as much demand as possible.
The temperature in London is close to freezing. In the cold, Mona and millions of other Londoners are using whatever they can find to keep warm.
It's quite possible that people will start to use all forms of different heating. Old paraffin heaters will come out. heaters that use compressed gas, LPG, butane and propane, those kind of heaters will come out and people will start to make mistakes.
And I can just see that if candles and tea lights and paraffin heaters are not used carefully, they could be more dangerous to use than remaining cold. They'll cause fires, and of course the fires at that particular point in time, your fire brigade is going to be so stretched that they may not be able to come as quickly as they would like with gridlock on the roads.
Linda and the rest of the passengers have now been trapped underground for 45 minutes. The tunnel's emergency lights are on, powered by the system generators.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your driver. I have been informed there's been a major power cut. However, assistance will be with us shortly. I will keep you informed as the situation progresses. Thank you.
My little girl, she's all on her own. I've got to get out of here.
Just sit tight.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry to have kept you waiting. I have spoken to the National Grid and the power companies, and I'm now able to give you a brief statement. The power cut occurred at around 6 p.m. this evening and has affected a large area of the southeast of England. It was caused by the loss of gas from the North European pipeline following an explosion near St. Petersburg this morning. That explosion has now been confirmed as an act of terrorism, and I can assure you that Britain will be at the forefront of international efforts to bring the perpetrators to justice. Engineers from the National Grid are working to reroute electricity from those power stations which are unaffected. I can't give you an exact estimate of when this problem will be resolved, but I would ask you that while this situation continues, the public remains calm, keeps warm and stays safely at home unless absolutely necessary. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
What contingency plans have you got, Minister?
Following the power cuts that have thrown much of the southeast and parts of the Midlands into darkness, the Home Secretary has declared a state of emergency. The government is advising people not to leave their homes unless absolutely necessary.
Once the government has made an assessment of the extent of this type of power out, it's almost certain that they would declare a state of emergency. This would enable them to cancel all of public events and sporting events to try to minimise the number of people moving around and gathering in one place without formal electricity.
In Downing Street, the lights are still burning. Deep inside the Cabinet Office, the Prime Minister has convened a meeting of COBRA, the top-level committee designed to coordinate the government's response to the emergency.
Heathrow, Stansted and Gatwick remain closed. And of course the city is unlikely to function at all within the next 12 hours. And the implication in terms of the economy are obvious.
I would suggest that if we had a major blackout in London for around about 24 hours or so, the consequential loss, people not getting to work, trading stopping and all the rest of it, would run into billions of pounds.
The next 12 hours will be crucial in terms of public safety and security. While the situation remains unclear, people will start hoarding food and basic supplies. So we must expect localized disturbances and be prepared for looting and opportunistic crime. Cold is still, of course, the primary concern. Additional generators are being issued to local authority shelters, and we're working with social services to search buildings where the vulnerable may still have gone undetected.
But on the ground, the emergency effort is hampered by a lack of coordination and planning.
Currently, emergency plans exist at county level. That means they exist at local level and within the London boroughs. Widespread emergencies beyond a region have never been planned for.
In the event of a widespread power cut, I just don't feel that our emergency plans will be robust enough to cope. I believe that we haven't got the kind of overall plan that we ought to have to cope with something like this, purely because we don't have the funds to put something into place.
After an hour and a half, Linda and the other passengers are led to safety. Unable to reach her mother, Mona is desperate for any contact with the outside world.
In an emergency, the telephone becomes absolutely essential. The normal landline phone that you have in your home, you will be able to use. Mobile phones will also be usable, but all of these phones will become clogged very early on. Mobile phones may not even receive your call because when too many people try to operate them at the same time, the software will fall out. So communication will become incredibly difficult.
Okay, Mummy's here now.
Because the gas supply to homes has not been interrupted, the cooker is still working, but nothing else is.
If there's no power, there's no water. That's no drinking water, no washing water, no water for toilet. After a time, that would present a real problem.
I should be out there.
There's nothing you can do out there. Look, this is a privatised industry. It's the regulator who's responsible.
No, I'm the minister responsible. We made the promises.
That's precisely why we have to be careful. He's in operational charge, you do policy.
For God's sake, Sophie. People are going to die.
Obviously, there are those who are at risk. Look, we're in new territory. But you could use this as part of your argument to take greater legislative powers over the companies.
Mommy candles.
It's hopeless. Come, let's get warm.
After a hot meal, and without any other way of fending off the cold, mother and daughter have only each other for warmth.
I'm cold.
No, I know, darling. It'll be okay.
We depend for almost everything upon electricity. Without it, without the technology and services which keep us relatively safe, our survival instincts can prove deadly. It's 24 hours since Bill McAllister received the news of the pipeline disaster. The consequences of that single day will end his political career and destroy the credibility of his government forever. Could it have been prevented? Is there anything we can do to avoid the same fate?
Perhaps the British public has had it too good for too long. When we turn the switch, the lights come on, and we have some of the lowest electricity prices in Europe. Now, this situation cannot continue without having to put our hands in our pockets and pay a little bit more.
Should we force the power companies to generate the electricity we need, or control the market to make it deliver?
We've got to spend more time as an industry working with government to make sure that when they do bring forward policies for the energy industry, that they do it in the knowledge that there are risks all the time of unintended consequences arising, and we do it in a way that keeps the best of the marketplace alive and thriving for the benefit of electricity customers.
Should we rethink the policies that will make us so dependent on foreign fuel?
We need to set up a strategic framework for our electricity supply. Say 10% renewable electricity, which the government is already bent upon, and then let's say 30% coal, 30% gas, and 30% nuclear. And within that framework, you let market forces operate, and I'm sure that they would operate very efficiently. If you do that, you have a secure, balanced electricity supply, and what is more, you have an environmentally satisfactory electricity supply, rather than one that's predicated almost entirely on imported natural gas.
And surely we will need to know who, ultimately, is in charge of keeping the lights on.
The trouble is, there's no clear line of authority. There's no clarity as to who exactly is responsible for keeping the lights on. If you want security of supply, if you want what a modern economy needs, you have to be absolutely clear what your priorities are, who has the right powers, and how they will be exercised. Then the market works. But we're a long way from that point yet, and that is the challenge that should be at the DTI's door, morning, noon, and night.
No one wants to pay more for their electricity. But by saving on our bills now, we could end up paying a higher price in future. In a moment, the if debate with Jeremy Paxman. And next week, if things don't get better. In 2014, the gap between rich and poor in Britain is growing. One man wants to change all that. And that's when the trouble starts.
I want you to join me in fighting for fairness.
And discussing tonight's